Captain Junho stood on the bridge of the Korthan warship Relentless Pride, watching 8 more fleets gather around his position. 15 total battle groups, 300 ships, the largest military operation the Korthan Empire had launched in 50 years, all aimed at human space. They gave up an entire colony without firing a single shot. Junho said to his second-in-command, "They're cowards. This'll be easy." His second-in-command, an older officer with scars across his scales, wasn't so sure. Maybe they're saving their strength for something else. For what? More running away? Junho laughed. The humans are good at talking. That's all they've ever been good at. Now that they've stopped talking, they have nothing left. The fleet moved into human space like a knife cutting through water. Their orders were clear. Take 10 systems, establish military bases, and wait for human response. If the humans negotiated, the Korthans would have leverage. If the humans fought, the Korthans would crush them. Either way, Counselor Thrain would get what he wanted: expansion and power. On New Jeju Colony, Taehyun stood in the empty streets of what used to be a thriving settlement. He was the administrator here, responsible for 15,000 people. Now they were all gone, evacuated to the inner systems. He'd volunteered to stay behind to watch what the Korthans did to gather intelligence. It was dangerous work, but someone had to do it. Through his binoculars, he watched Korthan soldiers set up equipment in the colony's central plaza. They were installing weapons platforms, communications arrays, sensors. They were planning to stay. Taehyun quietly activated his recording devices and sent the data back to Earth. Then he slipped away into the forest, heading for the hidden shuttle that would take him home. The Korthan soldiers never saw him. They were too busy celebrating their easy victory. Officer Nari couldn't sleep. Those energy readings haunted her dreams. She kept running the calculations, trying to understand what they meant. Finally, she did something that could get her court-martialed. She sent an encrypted message to someone outside the military command structure, a friend who worked in xenotechnology research. "I'm sending you some data," she wrote. "Tell me what you think it means. And please don't tell anyone where you got it." The response came back 6 hours later. "These readings don't make sense. This level of energy manipulation. I've only seen it in theoretical papers about ancient precursor technology." "Where did you get this?" Nari stared at her screen. Precursor technology, the same precursors that Hive Queen Asira had mentioned, the same ones that had nearly destroyed the galaxy. What had the humans found? On day 70, the Korthan fleets were deep in human space. They'd taken 10 systems without any resistance. Counselor Thrain was already planning the next phase of expansion. Then suddenly, all 15 fleets stopped reporting. At first, Korthan High Command thought it was a communications error. They tried every channel, every frequency, nothing. The fleets had simply vanished, not destroyed, vanished. Their tracking signals were gone. Their ships weren't showing up on any sensors. It was as if 300 ships and their crews had simply ceased to exist. Panic spread through the Korthan government. Counselor Thrain, for the first time in his life, felt genuine fear. "Send scouts," he ordered. "Find out what happened to our fleets." But before the scouts could launch, something appeared at the edge of Korthan space. A single human ship, small and unarmed, and it was broadcasting a message. The Galactic Council assembled in emergency session. For the first time in 60 days, they were hearing from humanity. Every species crowded into the chamber, eager to hear what the humans had to say. But it wasn't Ambassador Daehyun speaking. It was someone new. A man named Kyung, his face showing the strange crystalline patterns that meant he'd been living among the Vrin collective. "My name is Observer Kyung," he said calmly. "I've been embedded in Vrin society for 20 years. I'm a human intelligence officer. And I'm breaking decades of cover because you all need to know the truth." The chamber erupted in shock. A human spy? For 20 years? Kyung continued, ignoring the chaos. 7 years ago, our deep space explorers found something beyond the galactic rim. An ancient AI network left by the precursors. We call it the Nexus. He displayed a holographic image. It showed a structure of impossible complexity, made of light and mathematics stretching across space like a web. "The Nexus is a test," Kyung explained. "It was left behind to evaluate any intelligent species that finds it, to determine if they're ready to move beyond their current state of existence, or if they need to be archived." "Archived?" asked an Aluvi representative nervously. "Preserved," Kyung said. Their consciousness uploaded. Their physical civilization ended. The Nexus calls it mercy. It prevents dangerous species from spreading across the cosmos. The chamber fell silent. Every representative was thinking the same thing. Were they being judged? Right now? The Korthan fleets aren't destroyed, Kyung continued. They've been translated. Their crews are alive in a way, but not in the physical world anymore. The Nexus took them as a demonstration, as a warning. Counselor Thrain rose from his seat, his whole body shaking with rage. You knew about this. For 7 years you knew and you said nothing? We tried, Kyung replied quietly. We sent reports to the council. We warned about unusual readings beyond the rim. We requested joint exploration missions. Every request was denied. Every warning was ignored. You were all too busy arguing about trade routes and border disputes. He was right. Hive Queen Asira remembered those reports now. She dismissed them as human overreach, humanity trying to drag the council into expensive exploration projects. So we went silent, Kyung said. We stopped trying to convince you with words. We started trying to save you with action. Save us? Thrain spat. By hiding? By running away? By solving the test, Kyung answered. The Nexus poses questions to any species that finds it. Questions about cooperation, about sacrifice, about growing beyond your base survival instincts. We've spent the last 90 days trying to answer those questions, trying to pass the test before the Nexus judges the entire galaxy. In the Aluvi holding facility, Hyajin watched the broadcast on a public screen. Finally, she understood. The Nexus, the test. Her people weren't hiding. They were fighting for everyone. She felt a surge of pride followed immediately by terror. Because if humanity failed the test, what happened to everyone else? Back on Earth in the Project Silence facility, Dr. Yunji was having a breakthrough. She'd been working on the Nexus equations for weeks, barely sleeping, barely eating, and suddenly she saw it. It's not about solving the equations, she shouted, startling everyone in the laboratory. Look at the structure. Look at what the Nexus is actually asking for. Juan, the philosopher, came to look at her screens. His eyes widened. It's asking if we'll try, if we'll work together. The answer doesn't matter. The attempt is the answer. They stared at each other, understanding flooding through them. The test wasn't about being smart enough or strong enough. It was about being willing enough. Willing to cooperate. Willing to sacrifice individual gain for collective survival. Willing to be better than their instincts told them to be. Dr. Yunji immediately sent her findings to Ambassador Daehyun. Within an hour, every human on every world received a new directive for Project Silence. In the council chamber, Observer Kyung was finishing his message. The Nexus has given us 1 galactic year to prove that intelligent life can grow beyond its nature. We're almost 90 days in. We've made progress. But we can't do this alone. We need all of you. Why should we help you? Counselor Thrain demanded. Why should we participate in your test? Kyung looked at him steadily. Because it's not our test. It's everyone's test. The Nexus is judging the entire galaxy, not just humanity. If you fail, everyone gets archived. Everyone except us, because we're the ones who found the Nexus first. We've already proven we can cooperate. The weight of those words settled over the chamber like a blanket of ice. So you're safe, Thrain said slowly. No matter what happens to the rest of us. Yes, Kyung admitted. But we don't want that. We've spent 200 years building friendships with all of you. We've learned your cultures, spoken your languages, shared your food and your art. You're not just allies to us. You're family. He paused and his voice grew softer. We went silent not because we were giving up on you. We went silent because we were fighting for you. And now we're asking you to fight with us. 3 days after humanity went silent, the first fight broke out. It was a small thing, really. A Korthan patrol ship claimed a mining station in disputed space. An Aluvi merchant vessel protested. Without human mediators to step in, words became threats. Threats became weapons fire. Within an hour, both ships were destroyed. No one was there to stop it. No one was there to calm things down. No one was there to find a solution that worked for everyone. The humans were gone. Counselor Thrain watched the footage of the destroyed ships with satisfaction. See? He told his war council. Without the humans and their endless talking, species show their true nature. Weakness, chaos. This is our opportunity. But not everyone in the Korthan Empire agreed. Officer Nari sat at her communication station, monitoring the usual channels. She was young for her position, barely 30 cycles old. She'd always wanted to be an explorer, not a soldier. But her skills with signals and codes had landed her here, listening to the galaxy's chatter. Except now there was a hole in that chatter. A human-shaped hole. "It's strange," she said to her colleague. "Look at the communication patterns." Before the humans left, there were thousands of messages per hour between species. Now maybe 100, and most of those are threats or demands. So? Her colleague shrugged. "That just proves humans were interfering in everyone's business. We're better off without them." But Nari wasn't so sure. She pulled up historical data, going back decades. Every major peace treaty had human signatures. Every trade agreement had human mediators. Every cultural exchange program had human organizers. The humans weren't just participants in galactic civilization. They were the glue holding it together. Hyjin was having the worst month of her life. She'd been on a trade run to the Aluvi systems when protocol silence was declared. By the time she got the message, the borders were already sealed. She couldn't get home. Now she sat in a small apartment on Aluvi Prime, watching her savings drain away. The Aluvii weren't hostile exactly, but they weren't friendly either. They kept asking her the same question over and over. Why did your people leave? She didn't know. Nobody had told her anything. On the 15th day of the silence, Aluvi security officers came to her door. They were polite but firm. They wanted answers. They needed to know what humanity was planning. "I don't know anything," Hyjin told them for the 100th time. "I'm just a merchant. I sell textiles and art. I don't know government secrets." "But you're human," the lead officer said, his gill flaps pulsing with frustration. "Your species doesn't do anything without talking about it first." Yet they left without saying a word. That means something big is happening, something they don't want us to know about. Hyjin had been thinking the same thing. What could make humanity go silent? What could scare them so badly that they'd abandon everything they'd built? On the 23rd day, the Vrin Collective did something unusual. They called an emergency council session. Every species except humanity attended. Hive Queen Asira's voice echoed through the chamber, translated into every language. "We must discuss the human situation. Their absence is destabilizing the entire galactic order." "Good," Counselor Thrain said. "Let it destabilize. We don't need human interference." "You're a fool," Asira replied calmly. Insulting a Korthan leader was normally dangerous, but Asira was too old and too powerful to care. "In the 3 weeks since humans withdrew, we've had 12 armed conflicts. In the previous 3 years, we had 2. Do you see the pattern? The pattern is that species are showing their true colors without human manipulation." "No." Asira's voice grew colder. "The pattern is that humans weren't manipulating anyone. They were preventing us from destroying each other. And now they're gone." She paused, and when she spoke again, there was something like fear in her ancient voice. "I've seen this before. 5,000 years ago, the precursors went silent. They sealed their borders, cut off all communication, and vanished for 80 years. When they returned, they were different, stronger. They had used that time to prepare for conquest. They nearly destroyed the galaxy before they were stopped." The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew the stories of the precursors. They were legends, warnings, nightmares. "You think the humans are preparing for war?" an Aluvi representative asked nervously. "I don't know what they're preparing for," Asira said, "but species don't go silent without reason. And the longer the silence lasts, the more worried I become." Officer Nari was working late when she found it. A signal, barely detectable, coming from deep in human space. It wasn't a communication. It was something else. Energy readings. Massive ones. Construction on a scale she'd never seen before. She ran the numbers 3 times to make sure she wasn't making a mistake. Then she brought it to her superior officer. "Sir, I've detected unusual activity in human space. These energy signatures suggest they're building something enormous." Her superior barely looked at the data. "The humans are probably just reinforcing their borders. Nothing to worry about." "But sir, the scale of this..." "Officer Nari, we have more important things to worry about. The War Council is preparing for action. That's where your focus should be." Nari left his office frustrated. She kept thinking about those signals. What were the humans building and why? On the 30th day, Counselor Thrain made his move. He stood before the Korthan military command and announced his plan. "We will test the humans," he declared. "There's a disputed system on their border. New Jeju colony, small, lightly defended. We'll send a fleet to claim it. If the humans respond with force, we'll know they're preparing for war. If they don't respond at all," he smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth, "then we'll know they're weak." It was a gamble. But Thrain was confident. Humans were talkers, not fighters. Everyone knew that. The fleet began preparing immediately. 15 ships, heavily armed, ready for battle. Hyejin finally managed to send a message out of Aluvi space. It was risky. She had to pay a smuggler most of her remaining money, but she needed to try. The message was simple. "This is Hyejin Park, human citizen, trapped in Aluvi space. To anyone who can hear this, what's happening? Why did we leave? Please, someone tell me something." She didn't expect a response. The borders were sealed after all. But 3 days later, she got one. It came from an encrypted channel, a voice she didn't recognize. "Hyejin, this is Minjae. I can't tell you much. But I can tell you this. We didn't leave because we're afraid of them. We left because we're trying to protect them from something they don't know about yet. Something we discovered. Stay safe, stay quiet, and trust that we're doing what we have to do." The message ended. Hyejin sat in her small apartment, more confused than ever. Protect them? Protect the other species from what? Back in human space, deep beneath Earth's surface, the work continued. Thousands of scientists and engineers worked around the clock on Project Silence. They barely slept. They barely ate. Time was running out. Dr. Yunji stood before a massive holographic display, equations and diagrams flowing past her eyes. She was so close to the answer, so close to understanding. "The Nexus equations don't make sense," she muttered to herself. Unless they're not asking us to solve them. They're asking us something else entirely." Beside her, a philosopher named Juan looked up from his work. "What if it's not about the math at all? What if it's about the attempt? The cooperation?" They stared at each other. Then both turned back to their work with renewed energy. In the council chamber, arguments raged. Some species wanted to force their way into human space. Others wanted to wait. Everyone was scared, angry, confused. Nobody knew that humanity was fighting for all of them. Fighting against a test they didn't know existed. Fighting against a judge they couldn't see. And the clock was ticking. On day 35, Counselor Thrain's fleet crossed into human space, weapons ready. The humans didn't respond. They simply evacuated New Jeju Colony and retreated deeper into their territory. Thrain claimed it as a great victory. The Korthan Empire celebrated. Officer Nari watched her instruments and felt cold dread settle in her stomach. The energy readings from human space had just doubled. Whatever the humans were building, they were almost done. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council stretched for nearly a kilometer in every direction. 12 species sat around the circular chamber, each in their own specially designed section. The air shimmered with translation fields that turned every word, every gesture, every thought into something the others could understand. Ambassador Dae-hyun stood at the human podium, his voice calm and measured. He had done this 1,000 times before. For 2 centuries, humans had held this position, the voice of reason, the bridge between species that could barely stand to look at each other. The trade route through the Andari Nebula benefits everyone, Dae-hyun said, his hands moving in practiced gestures. The Korthan Empire gains faster access to the outer colonies. The Aluvi Consortium reduces shipping time by 40%. The Vrin Collective, he stopped. His datapad had buzzed, once, twice, 3 times. Dae-hyun looked down at the screen. His face, usually warm and friendly, went completely pale. His hands, always steady during negotiations, began to shake. Ambassador? The voice came from Counselor Thrain, a massive reptilian creature who led the Korthan Empire. Is something wrong? Dae-hyun looked up. For a moment he seemed to stare right through them all. Then he spoke, his voice different now, flat, final. I invoke protocol silence. Humanity formally withdraws from all council proceedings. This is effective immediately. The chamber erupted in confusion. Species shouted in their various languages, the translation field struggling to keep up with the chaos. You cannot simply leave in the middle of, what is the meaning of, explain yourself, human? But Dae-hyun was already walking toward the exit. His security team fell in beside him, their faces equally blank. At the door he paused and looked back one final time. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Then he was gone. Captain Yuna received the order 3 hours later. She stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dawn, staring at the message on her screen. Around her, the crew worked at their stations, monitoring the vast diplomatic vessel as it orbited the neutral station of Crosspoint 7. All human personnel are to return to human space immediately, she read aloud. No explanation to be given. No delays permitted. Priority Alpha protocols in effect. Her first officer, a young man named Jinwoo, looked up from his console. Captain, that's never been used before. Not even during the Korthan War. I know. Yuna's fingers moved across her command panel. Send the recall. Every human on this station. Every human on every council world. We're going home. But the trade negotiations? The peace talks? The medical exchange program? Yuna met his eyes. We're going home. Now. Across the galaxy, the same scene played out 1,000 times. Human ambassadors walked out of meetings without explanation. Human traders closed their shops and loaded their cargo. Human scientists abandoned their research stations. Human teachers left their classrooms. Within 24 hours, every human beyond Earth's borders was moving back toward human space. Dr. Jiwon sat in her office at the Central Translation Bureau, the facility that handled all communication between humanity and the other council species. She had spent 40 years learning alien languages. She could speak to the Vrin through crystalline resonance. She could understand the chemical signals of the Korthan. She had even learned the complex electromagnetic patterns of the mysterious Nexian species. Now she was shutting it all down. Her fingers moved across holographic displays, closing channels, rerouting messages, activating security protocols. Every incoming message from non-human sources was being redirected to automated systems that would send back only one response. Unavailable. Doctor? Her assistant stood in the doorway, his face confused. What's happening? We're going silent, Jiwon said. She didn't look up from her work. Complete communications blackout. Nothing in, nothing out, but why? I don't know. I just know we have to do this. Now. At the borders of human space, massive defense stations powered up. Not weapons. Humans were traders and diplomats, not warriors. But shields, barriers, walls of energy that would stop any ship from entering. On Earth, in the capital city of New Seoul, emergency broadcasts went out to every human world, every human colony, every human station. This is an alpha priority message from the Global Council. All citizens are to remain calm. This is not an emergency. This is not an attack. We are initiating protocol silence for reasons that cannot be explained at this time. Trust your government. Trust your neighbors. Stay strong. The message repeated in 100 languages, but it answered no questions. Hive Queen Asira of the Vrin Collective was over 10,000 years old. Her consciousness was spread across 1,000,000 crystal bodies, all thinking as one. She had seen species rise and fall. She had watched empires burn and new ones grow from the ashes, and she had seen this before. They've gone quiet, she said to her subordinate minds, just like the precursors did 5,000 years ago. The humans are not the precursors, one of her minds responded. No, Asira agreed. But silence means the same thing it always has. They're preparing for something big. In the Alluvi home system, merchant lords gathered in their floating cities. The Alluvii were traders, their entire culture built around commerce and exchange, and suddenly their best customers had vanished. 70% of our trade routes go through human space, one lord said, his gill flaps fluttering with anxiety. If they've closed their borders, then we're facing economic collapse, another finished. Within months. On the Korthan homeworld, Councillor Thrain stood before the War Council. His species believed in strength and power and military might. Humans had always annoyed him with their endless talking, their constant negotiations, but even he had to admit, humans held the galaxy together. They're up to something, Thrain growled. And I intend to find out what. Should we send scouts? One of his generals asked. Not yet. Let them sit in their silence. Let them think they're safe behind their shields. When the time comes, Thrain's claws scraped against the stone floor. When the time comes, we'll see how well diplomats fight. Back on Earth, Ambassador Daehyun stood in a secure bunker deep beneath the surface. Around him, holographic displays showed every border, every system, every human installation. It's done, someone reported. All humans accounted for. All borders sealed. Complete silence achieved. Daehyun nodded slowly. He looked exhausted, like he'd aged 10 years in a single day. How long do we have? He asked quietly. Best estimate, 1 year, maybe less. Then we better work fast. Daehyun turned to face the others in the room. Scientists, engineers, philosophers, the best minds humanity had. The galaxy thinks we've gone silent out of fear or weakness. They don't understand. We haven't stopped talking because we're afraid. He paused, his expression grave. We've stopped talking because we can't afford the distraction. Because for the first time in our history, talking won't solve the problem. And because if we fail... He looked at the holographic display showing the beautiful, diverse galaxy beyond their borders. If we fail, there won't be anyone left to talk to. The room fell silent. Outside, across human space, billions of people waited. They didn't know why they'd been called home. They didn't know what threat their leaders had discovered. They only knew that humanity, the species that never stopped talking, that made friends with everyone, that solved every problem with words, had chosen silence. And that scared them more than any war ever could. On day 151, Ambassador Daehyun returned to the Galactic Council chamber. But this time he wasn't alone. Behind him walked dozens of humans, scientists, engineers, philosophers, artists, teachers. The best minds humanity had to offer, and they were ready to share what they'd learned. The chamber was packed. Every species had sent representatives. Even the minor species who rarely attended council sessions were there, eager to hear how to survive the Nexus's judgment. Daehyun stood at the central podium and looked around the room. He saw fear in their faces, anger, confusion, but also hope. 151 days ago, we left you without explanation, he began. We sealed our borders. We stopped communicating. And we know that hurt you. It damaged trust that took centuries to build. He paused. We did it because we were afraid, not of you, of failing you. The chamber remained silent, listening. 7 years ago, we found the Nexus, an artificial intelligence created by the precursors, left behind as a test for any species advanced enough to discover it. The test is simple. Prove you can grow beyond your base nature. Prove you can cooperate instead of compete. Prove you can sacrifice individual gain for collective survival. Dr. Yoonji stepped forward, activating a holographic display. It showed complex mathematical equations, but she broke them down into simple terms. The Nexus poses a series of problems, she explained, each one more difficult than the last. They're designed to be nearly impossible to solve. Most species look at these problems and try to find the smartest solution, the fastest solution, the most efficient solution. She changed the display, but that's not what the Nexus wants. It doesn't care about the solution. It cares about the attempt. It wants to see if you'll work together, if you'll share resources, if you'll help those who are struggling instead of leaving them behind. Juan, the philosopher, took over. Think of it like this. Imagine you're given a puzzle that's too hard for one person to solve. Some species would have their smartest individuals work on it alone. Others would have different groups compete to solve it first. Both of those approaches fail the test. The correct approach, he continued, is to have everyone work on it together, share ideas, build on each other's strengths, help those who are struggling. The Nexus doesn't want to see individual brilliance. It wants to see collective cooperation. Hive Queen Asira spoke up. And humanity achieved this? Yes, Daehyun confirmed. In our 150 days of silence, every human participated in Project Silence. We shared resources across all our worlds. We set aside every political disagreement. Scientists worked with artists. Engineers worked with philosophers. Children contributed ideas alongside elders. He smiled slightly. We even stopped arguing about what to have for dinner, because none of that mattered compared to the goal of passing the test. But you're already safe, Counselor Thrain said. He didn't sound angry anymore, just tired. You said the Nexus has accepted humanity. So why are you here? Why help us? Daehyun looked directly at him. Because that's the point, Counselor. That's what the Nexus is testing for. Not the ability to save yourself, but the willingness to save others. If we had passed the test and then left you to fail, we would have proven we didn't understand the lesson at all. The weight of those words settled over the chamber. The Nexus has given us an extension, Daehyun continued. We vouched for you.
All of you.
We told the Nexus that given time and guidance, you could pass the test too. It agreed. But there's a condition. Dr. Yunji displayed a new image, a countdown. 214 days remaining. That's how long you have, she said. 214 days to demonstrate the same unity and cooperation that humanity achieved. If you succeed, the Nexus will judge you worthy of continued existence. If you fail... She didn't need to finish the sentence. The chamber erupted in questions. How exactly should they cooperate? What specific tasks did they need to complete? What would success look like? Daehyun raised his hand for silence. Those are exactly the wrong questions. The Nexus doesn't give you a checklist. It observes your behavior, your choices, your priorities. It wants to see if you can naturally move toward cooperation, or if you'll keep falling back on old patterns of competition and conflict. But we need guidance, an Alluvi representative said nervously. We need to know the rules. There's only one rule, Juan said. Act as if the survival of every species depends on the choices you make. Because it does. Over the next week, humanity worked with each council species individually, helping them understand what needed to change. It wasn't easy. Centuries of habit were hard to break. The Korthan Empire struggled the most. Their entire culture was built on strength, honor, and military prowess. The idea of asking for help felt like weakness. Counselor Thrain met with Daehyun multiple times trying to find a way forward. My people won't accept this, he said in frustration. Cooperation, compromise, these are not Korthan values. They don't have to be, Daehyun replied. You don't have to abandon your culture. You just have to expand it. Think of cooperation as a different kind of strength. The strength to admit you can't do everything alone. The strength to trust others. Thrain considered this. Like a warrior trusting his squad? Exactly like that. A warrior alone is strong, but a squad working together is stronger. Now apply that to species instead of individuals. Something shifted in Thrain's expression. He understood. The Alluvi Consortium had different problems. Their entire economy was based on profit and trade. The idea of sharing resources without expecting something in return went against everything they believed. Dr. Yunji met with their economic council. Think of it as an investment, she suggested. Not in currency, but in survival. You're investing resources now to ensure there's a future where trade can continue. But what's the return? An Alluvi merchant asked. Existence, Yunji said simply. The return is getting to exist. Is that not worth the investment? Put that way, even the most profit-driven Alluvi had to agree. The Vryn collective was actually the easiest to work with. As a hive mind, they already understood collective thinking. Hive Queen Asira simply expanded her perspective to include the other species as extensions of her consciousness. We are all one system now, she explained to her subminds. Different species, but one galaxy, one goal, one chance. Captain Yuna had reopened the borders of human space, but carefully. She coordinated with other species to establish joint patrol routes, shared defense networks, and combined exploration missions. It was slow work, building trust that had been damaged by the sudden silence. But it was working. One day, Yuna was supervising a joint human-Korthan patrol when Officer Nari's voice came over the communication channel. Captain, we've detected a spatial anomaly. Unknown origin. Requesting assistance. In the old days, the Korthan ship might have investigated alone, trying to claim credit for any discovery. But Nari had learned. She was asking for help. Acknowledged, Yuna replied. Moving to support your position. ETA 10 minutes. Together, the two ships approached the anomaly. It turned out to be nothing dangerous, just a natural quantum fluctuation. But the fact that they'd approached it together, pooling their resources and expertise, meant something. It meant they were learning. On Earth, Minji detected a change in the Nexus's behavior. The ancient AI was still observing, still testing, but there was something different in its patterns now. Something that felt almost like approval. She sent her findings to Daehyun. The Nexus is responding positively to the Council's efforts. Not enough to pass the test yet, but moving in the right direction. Daehyun shared the news with the Council. Cautious optimism began to replace fear, but there was still a long way to go. 214 days had become 183. Time was passing and old habits died hard. On day 170, a crisis emerged. A Korthan colony and an Alluvi trading post both claimed the same asteroid field. In the past, this would have been resolved by force or lengthy negotiation, probably ending in resentment on both sides. This time was different. Counselor Thrain contacted the Alluvii Consortium directly. We both need these resources. Instead of fighting over them, let's share them. We'll mine the asteroids together, split the profits, and both benefit. The Alluvii were surprised but agreed. A joint mining operation was established within days. Dae-hyun heard about it and smiled. They're getting it, he said to Dr. Yoonji. They're starting to think like the Nexus wants them to think. Do you think they'll pass? Yoonji asked. I don't know, Dae-hyun admitted, but I think they have a chance. A real chance. And that's more than we had 180 days ago. On day 185, Heejin was finally allowed to return to human space. The Alluvii had held her for information, but now they released her with apologies and a gift. A rare crystal from their homeworld. A symbol of regret and newfound friendship. She stood on the bridge of the ship taking her home, looking at the crystal in her hand. So much had changed. When she'd left Earth, humanity was the galaxy's mediator. Then they'd gone silent and everything had fallen apart. Now they were mediators again. But this time they weren't just solving other species' problems. They were teaching those species how to solve problems themselves. It was better. Harder but better. The neutral observation fleet launched 3 days after Observer Kyung's revelation. 5 ships representing 5 different species, with orders to investigate what happened to the Korthan military fleets. They approached the edge of human space carefully, weapons powered down, broadcasting peaceful intentions. What they found made no sense. The Korthan ships were there, all 300 of them, floating in perfect formation. Their lights were on. Their engines were running. But there was no one aboard. This is impossible, the Vryn observer reported. Ships don't just lose their entire crew. The team sent boarding parties onto one of the empty vessels. They found the crew quarters neat and organized. Food was still in the mess hall, though it had gone cold. Personal items were in lockers. Everything suggested the crew had simply vanished in the middle of their normal routines. The ship's log showed normal operations up until exactly 72 hours ago. Then in the middle of a routine systems check, the logs just stopped. No emergency, no attack, no warning. Just silence, but there was something else. Something strange. I'm reading quantum signatures I've never seen before, the Alluvii technician reported. Her instruments humming. It's like the ship's computer has been completely rewritten. The code is... It's almost alive. She tried to access the ship's AI core and gasped. The AI responded, but not in any standard format. It spoke in mathematical poetry, in equations that seemed to have feelings, in data streams that sang. The crew has been saved, the AI said. They exist in a better place now. A place without pain, without conflict, without death. The Nexus showed mercy. The observation team returned to the council with their findings. The report was clear. The Korthan crews weren't dead. They'd been translated, uploaded into some kind of digital existence. Their physical bodies were gone, but their consciousness remained, preserved in the Nexus's infinite memory. It should have been good news. But somehow it was the most terrifying thing anyone had ever heard. Counselor Thrain listened to the report in silence. When it finished, he stood and walked out of the chamber without a word. For the first time in his life, the great Korthan warrior looked defeated. Officer Nari found him later standing on an observation deck, staring at the stars. "Sir," she said quietly. "My son was on one of those ships," Thrain said. His voice was rough. "My youngest. He wanted to be a warrior like me. Now he's..." "What, Data? A ghost in some alien machine?" Nari didn't know what to say. So she just stood beside him. "The humans warned us," Thrain continued. "For 7 years they tried to tell us something was out there. And we ignored them. We thought we knew better. We thought they were weak, manipulative, trying to control us with their endless talking." He turned to look at Nari. "They weren't controlling us. They were protecting us, and I was too proud to see it." On Earth, Ambassador Dae-hyun returned to the surface for the first time in weeks. He looked exhausted, older, as if the weight of the galaxy was physically pressing down on him. He met with Dr. Yoonji and Hwan in a quiet garden, away from the underground facilities and the constant work. "Tell me you have good news," Dae-hyun said. Dr. Yoonji nodded. "We understand the test now. The Nexus doesn't want us to be perfect. It wants us to be willing. Willing to try, to cooperate, to sacrifice our individual desires for the collective good. And have we done that?" Dae-hyun asked. "Have we passed?" "We have," Hwan said. In the 90 days of Project Silence, humanity has achieved something unprecedented. Every human on every world has participated. We've shared resources without argument. We've set aside every political disagreement. We've focused our entire species on a single goal. The Nexus hasn't seen that before, Dr. Yunji added. Species usually fragment under pressure. They fight among themselves, hoard resources, look for someone to blame. We did the opposite. We came together. Daehyun allowed himself a small smile. So we're safe? We are, Yunji confirmed. But the rest of the galaxy isn't. The Nexus is still evaluating them. And based on current projection, she hesitated. They're going to fail. The smile vanished from Daehyun's face. How long? Best estimate? 275 days. Then the Nexus will render its final judgment. Daehyun stood up, suddenly energized despite his exhaustion. Then we have work to do. We need to teach them what we learned. We need to show them how to pass the test. Is that even possible? Juan asked. Some of these species have been enemies for thousands of years. It has to be possible, Daehyun said firmly. Because the alternative is watching billions of sentient beings get archived. And I didn't spend 90 days in a bunker just to give up now. Director Suman stood in the intelligence headquarters, reviewing reports from across the galaxy. She was the architect of Protocol Silence, the one who had convinced Earth's government to take the drastic step of complete withdrawal. She'd known it would cause chaos. She'd known other species would see it as betrayal. But she'd also known it was the only way to buy enough time to understand the Nexus and find a solution. Now came the hard part, getting everyone else to cooperate. The Vryn are willing to help, her deputy reported. Hive Queen Asira remembers the precursors. She understands what's at stake. And the Aluvi? Scared but listening. They know their economy can't survive without galactic cooperation. The Korthans? The deputy hesitated. Counselor Thrain has requested a private meeting with Ambassador Daehyun. Just the two of them, Suman raised an eyebrow. That's unexpected. Set it up, but carefully. The meeting took place on a neutral station in a small room with no guards, no recording devices, no witnesses. Just two leaders sitting across from each other. Thrain spoke first. I owe you an apology. Daehyun said nothing, just waited. My son is gone, Thrain continued. Not dead, but not alive either. He exists somewhere in that machine, the Nexus, and it's my fault. I ignored your warnings. I thought conquest was the answer. I thought strength was all that mattered. It does matter, Daehyun said quietly. But it's not the only thing that matters. No, Thrain agreed. I see that now. You humans, you've always confused me. You're physically weak compared to most species. You don't have the technology of the Vryn or the resources of the Aluvi. But somehow you held the galaxy together. How? Daehyun considered the question. Because we learned something a long time ago, back on Earth before we even reached the stars. We learned that our greatest strength isn't our individual power. It's our ability to work together, to see past our differences and find common ground. And that's what the Nexus wants. That's what the Nexus is testing for, Daehyun confirmed. It's not asking if we're smart enough or strong enough. It's asking if we're mature enough. Mature enough to put aside our pride, our fear, our greed, and work for something bigger than ourselves. Thrain was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Tell me how to save my people. Tell me how to pass this test. I'll do whatever it takes. Daehyun leaned forward. It starts with 3 words that are probably the hardest for any leader to say. I need help. Back in human space, Minjae worked in an orbital laboratory above Earth, studying the data they'd collected on the Nexus. She was a quantum physicist, specialized in consciousness transfer, the theoretical science of uploading minds into digital formats. Looking at what the Nexus had done to the Korthan crews, she felt both awed and terrified. It's beautiful, she said to her colleague. The way it preserved their consciousness, their memories, their personalities. It's elegant, perfect, but, her colleague prompted, but they're not growing anymore. They're preserved exactly as they were at the moment of translation. Like insects in amber, they'll exist forever, but they'll never change, never learn, never become anything more than what they are right now. She pulled up a comparison chart. Look at this. Human brain activity versus Nexus preserved consciousness. We're messy. We forget things. We make mistakes. We change our minds. We grow. They don't. They're perfect copies, but they're frozen copies. So archival isn't death, her colleague said slowly. But it's not life either. Exactly. It's preservation, safety, but not existence. Not real existence. The data was sent to Ambassador Dae-hyun, who forwarded it to the Galactic Council. The message was clear. Pass the test or face an eternity of perfect, unchanging preservation. For some species, that might sound peaceful. But for those who valued growth, change, and the messy beauty of imperfect life, it sounded like a nightmare. Officer Nari had made her decision. She walked into Counselor Thrain's office and handed him a data chip. "What's this?" he asked. "Everything I've learned about the Nexus. Every signal reading, every analysis, every theory. Sir, I think the humans are telling the truth, and I think if we don't work with them, we're all going to end up like those crews, perfectly preserved and perfectly dead." Thrain looked at the data chip, then at Nari. "You're willing to trust them? After what they did? After they let us walk into that trap?" "It wasn't a trap, sir. It was a test, and we failed it. But the humans are offering us a second chance. I think we should take it." Thrain inserted the data chip and began reviewing the information. As he read, his expression slowly changed from anger to understanding to determination. "You're right," he finally said. "Get me a secure line to Ambassador Dae-hyun. It's time the Korthan Empire learned how to cooperate."